Look at that.
Planning and zoning to order at 7:01 p.m. on January 10th. Regular members attending are myself, Anna Tamel, Phil West, Stephen Sicardi, James Laporta, and Christine Gray. And we did have Keith Bodwell. I presume he'll be back.
I'm still here.
Oh, there you go. Blind as a bat, that's me. And we have alternates Bruce Bennett and Michelle Ship. So who's missing that we need to seat someone for?
Will Evans, is he an alternate? I'm not.
He's an alternate. Will
Great.
is not here, but I think our regular members are all here tonight. So that's great. We are going to start with our zoning, our approval of minutes. They're right in front of me. They were two full pages. Karen did an outstanding job, especially on the planning workshop part.
I did make one little quick change, Anna, after you sent them back to me. I changed Christine to Ms. Gray because I usually try to not use first names. So the final minutes have a motion made by Ms. Gray as opposed to Christine.
Okay.
Consistent, Christine, with how
Okay.
what I
Okay. So a motion to approve the minutes.
There was also a minor typo of like an open parentheses after.
I fixed that one too. Yep. After Keith
Great.
Bodwell. Yep.
I should ask for discussion and errors first, shouldn't I? All right. Are we ready now? Any more pickups? A motion to pass as amended.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye, raise your hands.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. That's passed.
I wasn't there. I can't vote.
Okay, that's very good of you to point out. The alternates need to learn that little rule. You can't vote for minutes of a meeting you didn't attend. The next item is, where am I? New applications, it says none. Pending applications, it says none. Staff reports. I had asked Karen, but apparently not in time, to amend the agenda, the routine agenda, to include an item we had requested in the past, which was enforcement actions. And you'll do that from now on, right? Yeah, and there weren't any. As far as I know, am I right about that?
Absolutely correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And my report is pretty simple. It's pretty much the status quo from last month. Some things are moving forward. We're still working on the signage down in Cornwall Bridge for the new retail stores, which has got to be revisited again. And there is just a fair amount of talking and activity going on. So I'm going to retain my normal positivity regarding the fact that especially in the centers, that there is a lot of collaborative talking and excitement about some more things opening up in the near future.
Super. Thank you. It's nice that you keep things positive. Correspondence and communications.
It was your history piece and also the information that we sent, or I guess I was under other business, the information sent out about the legal,
On March, is it 11th or 12th, Karen?
12th was in the thing, I think, right?
Okay. March 12th. So I'm sure you all read my email where I mentioned that you're all going to have to produce at least 2 hours of training, evidence of 2 hours of training in 2023. And that training, I believe, Janelle, maybe you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but the chairman or the CEO has to send notification of that training to somebody or other in Hartford.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I don't know the ins and outs exactly. I'm still waiting on an update from OPM. My understanding is it will be like a yearly report of all the commissioners. It's
Right.
one of those tricky laws that it's definitely a self-reporting honor system type of follow-up.
Yeah. But I think, I think it's a good idea. Because
Yeah,
we don't
always.
want commissioners to
Mhm.
make dumb mistakes that make the town get sued. So,
When do we have to let Karen know if we want to do attend or do the Zoom thing?
I'm going to sign Anna up and then I'm going to sign myself up and I will have a computer in town hall. So I can put you on a Zoom meeting in the little kitchen area. For safety reasons, probably I wouldn't want to see more than 2 or 3 people in there, but if I put the computer in, somebody can come in. No one wants to listen to the whole thing. I can assure you of that.
When, do you know what the times are on the 12th?
Uh,
I can. Sure.
the thing that we sent around included those times and the
Okay.
topics. So you can
Right.
pick topics you're interested in. That's what Karen is helping you do. Anybody who really would like to sit through all 6 hours, we'll be happy to pay your bill too. And if you're gonna pay, because I will sit through it all.
Mhm.
There
Um,
are some parts, like there's a part on ZBA. It might be nice if I could find a ZBA member or 2 from Cornwall to come in and sit in for that part, so I might share it. There's also one wetlands piece by Michael Zitzka in the afternoon. That's one of the later ones. So I might be able to ask one, I have the feeling I have one Wetlands Commission member, at least, that Debbie Bennett, that would probably come in and sit and watch that one as well. But I thought it might be a good idea if we shared so that people could come in and get their, have time for what they're interested in and then be on their way and at least have some continuity of everybody then being able to bring something back for what they attended.
I'll try and find the email you sent.
Well, I will resend it to you happily, but still, no
Yeah.
problem.
Phil, it's between the hours, I believe, of 9 to like 4, but I would
Okay.
look at the details of the different sections.
Okay.
And Karen and
And
Anna
the
and
flyer-
all. I missed that.
I was just gonna say, the flyer says it's the 11th. It's a Saturday.
Yes.
The 12th is a Sunday. So if that makes a difference for people.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. It does. It's such a tedious Saturday.
Anna, did you
and
say that we'll be reimbursed for the expense?
I've got, it comes out of my budget to pay for it. I will just register enough to have Anna have her own. So Christine, if you want to go over and sit with your mother and keep her awake. No, I'm half kidding about that because she stayed awake the whole time last time. But then I'll have one that will be registered to me that you can all attend when you come in. So I pay for
I
them.
think so. It's $45, right? I'm gonna be
Right.
out. I'm gonna be out of town. I'll probably just register for it myself.
But
And
yeah.
just to jump in, I registered independently. So if anyone wants to come for a session, just coordinate with me. I live locally. You're most welcome. I have a large screen in the house. If you just want to attend for one session, let me know. I'm
Come at my house and I'll serve coffee and something good to eat.
Whoa.
Boy, my
Cinnamon
You
bun?
in, Anna.
the
my
company
town
will
hall invitation's really sounding awful. I'm gonna have to provide crumb. I
All
don't
right.
know.
Moving
okay.
right along.
Yep.
Other business, does that include an election, Karen?
Well, I am so grateful to have a wonderful town clerk that when I went to give her my posted, my amended agenda, she says, why do you have elections on there? I said, because we do it once a year. I said, it says it in the bylaw. She says, Karen, it says after municipal elections, there were none last fall. So it is every 2 years is after municipal elections as opposed to every year. I just went right over that piece. So
What were
Anna-
we supposed to be electing? Chair and vice chair?
your whole slate, chairman, vice chair, and secretary, yes.
Didn't we
But
do
it-
it last year?
We did do it
So-
last
And
year.
that was after municipal elections, yeah.
So we don't need to do it now.
Correct. Yeah, the bylaws say after municipal elections, of which there were none, as Vera so nicely pointed out. So it's every 2 years you elect your officers.
Okay, okay, you're right. There weren't any municipal. Okay,
You're
Fine.
stuck, Anna.
yeah,
Yeah.
apparently. Okay, then we're going to move on to the planning workshop because we have a lot of work to do. And maybe we could, well, I don't know, Janelle, what is your preference? Because I did read every word
Thank you.
of chapter 7, articles 7 through 12, and I picked up some typos. Shall I just email those?
Yeah, that's helpful. If it's something like that, that's the most helpful.
Yeah.
If it's glaring on the screen and really bothersome, by all means. But if it's a quick, easy email, and if anyone also didn't have enough time to really sit down and read through everything, but catches something later on, please just email me. That's really helpful. I've been looking at it for so long. I might miss a few things.
Exactly. I know how that is.
And I have a question. I don't know if this is a typo or not, but I noticed in the front in Article 2.1, where we're talking about the zoning things, it's an R1, an R2, and an R5, but the R2 says about 3 acres. So should that be
Right.
an
Typo.
It should be a
okay? I just
3.
want to make sure.
No, I
And
love it. I
I
love it.
missed that one, Michelle.
I wish I had thrown these in purposely just to make sure everyone was reading the document.
All right.
James,
Thank
you
you.
didn't pick that up. What, were you asleep at the wheel?
Yeah.
Like the band?
Well, that's why I questioned it. I was like, wow, nobody else said anything. Maybe this is being new on the commission and I don't quite understand the system.
No, please question everything by all means. Some of it's copy paste, so there's some little typographical things. It's been reorganized multiple times as well. So if numbers don't seem to match up, all of those little input, it's very, very helpful. And I thank all of you for looking at it so diligently.
Well, since you're on that page, the D at the bottom right hand is italic.
So just one thing, everything I've looked through the document. There are some things that are italicized. I will be getting rid of most of that. Some of it is just drawing commissioners' attentions to a few things that have changed, especially verbiage and language.
Okay.
Madam Chair, did you want to start? Did you have anything else to add?
No. Let's just, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Let's just start. Go ahead and screen share and we'll try to get through it as much as we.
According to the last email that I received from our chair, it seems like we had left off at permitted uses. So for everyone to recall, we did have a discussion about just the overall format. So you will see, you know what, I'm going to go back. I actually want to just look at a new, more detailed table of contents, just so you all can reference the order change, because this was a topic of a discussion at our last meeting. So this is the current order and things have changed just to correspond with our overall outline now. So we're now looking at Article 4, which is permitted uses, which I don't believe we have gotten to when it was in the different order.
Got it.
If this is confusing to anyone, please let me know. Some sections that you were used to being later in the document were actually moved up. And then some there weren't any sections that were actually moved farther in. It was more so we were just moving some documents earlier into the regulations so that all of the general notions, the general provisions, the general standards were discussed early on. And then as we work through the document, our chair really was helpful in thinking as we get more specific, we'll work through the document that way. So this is our current configuration. It has changed from the last reiteration that everyone has looked at, and this is our jump off point. So we've gone through our intent and purpose, our districts and our map. We've looked at all of our definitions, and now we're moving on to our permitted uses, if I'm not mistaken.
Where were they before? You know, in the old order, we had gotten through articles 1 through 6 of the old order.
So they were in,
And I can't,
no, let me grab that. I have, do not
Okay.
worry, I have it. I have it in every version. All right, so
does anybody else remember?
it was Article 7, permitted uses.
Okay.
I have the
So
two,
that's where we were up to, correct.
yeah, so I have the two, the old outline and the new outline in front of me, if anyone has questions about like, where was this, just to orient. Because now this document is oriented in a different way. So moving to, which is now Article 4, we get into permitted uses. So relatively early on in the document, I really appreciate how permitted uses immediately follows definitions. So there's a lot of definitions that will sort of be a precursor to this now Article 4. So we get into permitted uses. Nothing new other than firmer references to the sections that we're referencing. So now that the document has unfolded in the general organization in the way that will be, I'm really making note if there's specific uses or specific provisions very particular to a use that we're referencing that. So someone doesn't just think, oh, any agricultural use is definitely going to be permitted in any zone by right. It gives people a little bit of indication if they should anticipate doing a little bit of further research. So I don't want to go through it word for word because we've done that. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to bring to our attention? Any questions, any concerns?
I have to admit, this is one I didn't read word for word because it was less than 6.
Got it. No, everyone, like, please take your time. This is such an important exercise. I don't want to rush anything. So by all means, field any communication through the chair to me. One thing just about, so we get into our general rules. Our use is permitted in any zone, so by right, to really explain these are your permitted uses. Then we get into special permitted uses in any residential zone because it's universal to all the residential zones. Then we get very much more specific around R1, R3, R5, and then we move on to our general business zone. And then the chart that follows reflects everything in a much more visual way. And as I said, when I was introducing this article, what you're now seeing that you didn't see before is references to other. So if a special permit is used for a particular use, you're now seeing that that is getting referenced so that the specific provisions are made note of pretty early on in the document. I've added a little, just other than that, I have changed the numbering system of the current regulations that we're working with had these 0.1s and these 0.2s. And what I'm doing is really setting it up. So we start, it's 4.1, we go A through B, we go 1 through however many numbers we need, and so on and so forth, just to get away from that decimal system. I found it to be a little bit confusing.
Right. One of the things that I think a lot of people find hard to wrap their head around is the idea that the word that lawyers use all the time about our regulations being quote unquote permissive. And that's not a word that's really necessarily easy to wrap your head around. What it really means is unless something is specifically mentioned in our regulations, you're not allowed to do it in Cornwall. And I think we need to say that somewhere, and it would be perfect if we said it as the first paragraph under permitted uses.
So actually, if you get to 4.1B, 4.1B reads uses of
Oh, there
land.
you go. All right, you said it.
That's just reiterate, that was taken from page 80, but we're bringing it earlier into the document so that it is
Yeah.
clear that if we're not defining a use and we're not calling out a use, that it is not permitted.
Right.
But I think that's a great point. I think a lot of it's a difficult concept to understand until you take the literal read of the regulations.
I have a question on that.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So in that case, and like, is it absolutely not permitted, or is a special permit, or is there any like variance, or is that when they go to the ZBA, or like, is it just too bad, so sad?
I love this question because I feel there's always a solution. So I've run up against this. An example would be someone wanted to host an event use, like events at the residential property. It's not permitted. Nowhere in the regulations does it. This is not in this town. This is in a different fictional example. Nowhere in the regulations is any reference to assembly, event, philanthropic event. Like nothing was even close to this particular use that they were looking for. So I advise that applicant, you can always petition the commission for a regulation change if you feel very strongly about the use that you wish. A good example of that would be the Winvian over in Morris. So that hotel concept was never, like, it was just nothing in the regulations could fit with what it is that they wanted to do on that property. So that applicant hired professionals to put forth a petition to the commission, very thorough, just stating this is what it is that we would wish our use to be, went through the zoning text amendment, and then move forward with all the permitting. So I always say there's a solution. Something towns are facing with right now, I think relevant for all of us, is the short-term rental concept. That's not often reflected upon in the regulations. Traditionally, our regulations discuss hotels, motels, inns, and not this concept of a residential house being utilized in that manner. So that's something that we're certainly tackling as a use that hasn't been discussed because it's sort of a new use, and it's evolved in a different way than our regulations have been able to handle. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and Michelle, just to follow up, so ZBA, to be very clear, they are not legally authorized to vary uses. So
Okay.
I've seen this in practice. It's not great because ZBA, they truly have the authority to provide for relief from very specific, and it often is a dimensional requirement within the regulations due to a bona fide hardship. So the ZBA's role really isn't to stray from the regulations in any way, other than for a very particular parcel and a very particular project that has very particular hardships that are caused by the topography, the lay of the land, and not so much just that the applicant wants what they're asking for.
So it's not a quick fix. It's a long process of changing regulations. So if somebody wants to do something and it's not stated, then it's not going to be, oh, in a month you'll have it figured out. You're going to have it however many months it takes to go through the process.
Yeah, I would definitely advise an applicant to be patient. I have had situations just where a little bit of creativity can help. There are some terms that are loose, and I think that can work to our benefit. Terms that I think of in our regulations are that whole concept, like outdoor recreation areas, such as ski areas, golf courses. They give a few examples, but still there's a lot of range there. So some terms in the regulation, just with some creative thinking, hopefully can give the applicant a little bit of an easier path. But they're they're not the easiest to work with if they don't offer the use that you really are looking for.
There's a
Thank
time
you.
factor too, Michelle. I have been keeping a list for the last few years of regulations that might need to be reviewed or amended. And pretty soon we're going to get to a point where we're done with this and we're done with the affordable housing stuff. Then we're going to have a chance to look at that list and decide for ourselves what our priorities should be. And, a single applicant petition to amend the regulations may not be very high on that priority list. It's up to us.
Right. That's why I said how many of our months it takes. Because
lot.
yeah.
Now, isn't there statutory requirement though? If somebody puts in a zoning amendment, there is timeframes that you can't just say, we're busy, come back when we're not.
Exactly.
Okay,
You
I didn't
have
know
to
that.
accept it, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like a text amendment. So if an applicant comes to you with a text amendment and is proposing something and they pay the fee, you as a commission have to publicly hear it and act on it and make a decision. And with text amendments, the rationale behind those text changes is really tied to your POCD. So if your POCD supports what they are supporting and the commission can't really find the right reason, if they really wish to deny it, it can definitely strong arm them into accepting the amendment.
Okay. All right. Moving on.
Okay, so then we get into all of our uses in our residential zones. It starts with uses that require a zoning permit. Then we get into site plan, and then we get into our special permit. So that format carries through for each zone. And then you'll see the same happens for our R3, our R5, and then we move into our general business zone. And then that definitely follows that same formatting where zoning permit, site plan, and then our special permit. And then we get to our permitted use table that just it simplifies everything. So if anyone is curious about a particular use, they have all the permitted uses listed, and then they could see whether it's allowed in zones, by what permitting process, and if it is prohibited.
That table is a tremendous advance over our old regulations. Thanks for that.
Could we talk about the numbering and the lettering, the 1 and the A's?
Yeah, I was hoping someone would express
Okay.
interest, because it is
Well, some of my
it's-
typos
it-
concern the numbering.
it's troubled me. It has troubled me.
Well, so what I'm actually struggling with is because sometimes you have bullet points and you'll start with A and then you'll indent with 1, which is what we've done here. But sometimes people will start with 1 and then indent with A. So if, for example, on page 10, top right, there's it's letter B, uses permitted in the R1 zone. I couldn't figure out for the longest time whether that was a heading or
Yeah.
a note underneath a heading, right? Is B the primary, or is it a bullet point basically? And so I guess I'm wondering if it would make sense to indent.
I was just going to say that, Christine.
Yeah.
I was going to say for you mentally, if an indentation is helpful, just
Yep.
so that hierarchy is visual,
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
would help clarify so many elements, so that we're looking, A's tend to be like how we're grouping things. So as you grow more and more familiar with the new rewrite, you'll realize, okay, A is very much the zoning permit throughout each different zoning permit types. So then it's sort of hopefully helping people to understand how it's themed, but indenting, why didn't I think of that? I think it's great.
Well,
Might
if
be
you're,
spacing.
if you're gonna indent the A, are you gonna indent the one double twice?
I wouldn't actually indent the letter, I would be indenting the number.
The numbers, yes.
Okay,
Does
so
that,
4-4A would stick out and then the 1, 2, 3 on the under 4-4, right?
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, and some, because it does get.
That's
and
fine.
Christine, thank you, because it does get confusing because some categories, especially site plan approval, there's often only one
Yes.
use that requires a site plan approval. So when I was writing this, I kept kind of getting lost because there's only one, and then you move on to the next heading. So I really like just throwing in an indent to make it easier to just visualize the hierarchy.
Yep.
Great.
Cool.
Great.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I'm glad someone brought it up because I've been struggling. Okay, anyone else? Okay, so we're at our table. Then we get to general standards. We have discussed general standard. It's just in a new spot because we're backing it after our permitted uses. And this applies to all uses. So it's nice. It sort of wraps up what all uses are subject to.
And this too, in this chapter, these are new concepts for us, but in the sense that they pervaded the old regulations, but they were never summoned together and labeled in this way. And I just, again, want to thank you for adding this chapter.
Oh, no, you're welcome. And I think really the leg to stand on is also the Connecticut General Statutes,
Yeah,
Chapter
absolutely.
124. That's really where all of this comes from. And this is
Right.
really how the towns are allowed basically to use their planning and zoning powers. So we're really hemmed in by that, but I think bringing it up and referencing the statutes and putting it in one place, hopefully it's helpful.
Yeah, these are kind of like our marching orders. We have to
Yeah.
be concerned
Off-
about these things.
Oftentimes the question comes up about like other permits and other approvals. And I think just putting this really blatant into the regulations so that anything were to come up, Karen has like a really strong reference point to say you are subject to this as it says in here in one place pretty directly.
Mhm.
So we get into dimensional requirements. This was previously in our section 6. If you want to revisit it, that's happy to do so. And again, some of the italicized, it's not going to be left that way. It's just reminding the commission when we were working through the verbiage that there was some changes just to make things either hopefully more clear or just to serve as a more useful document. So when we're ready to go to public hearing and look at this as a finalized document, these sorts of things won't be italicized.
Okay,
We were gonna add feet to the minimum side buildable area rectangle.
I added feet everywhere except for that. I can certainly add feet there as well.
Great.
Great. Good catch, James. I did it everywhere but that one. That's so particularly funny. Okay. Thank you for that.
I was having a deja vu. I'm like, wait a minute. I was-
Oh, I love it. I really wonder why I didn't do it there. Okay. Anything, and anyone else, any other thoughts? I'm like flagging this page really.
and you know, you have down there a reference to page 52 in the old regs. you've made that lighter. That means, you know, you're going to remove that. Our references to the old regs will go away. They were just for our benefit in reviewing.
Yes,
Right.
whenever, let me know when that time comes. I've left those in there just
Mhm.
for orientation, especially as we're really working to finalize this document, if help to have that origin part. So I've left them in.
Well, and you'll keep a copy of that somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
right.
I have many handwritten copies too.
I feel like leaving that in while we're educating the town on the changes would make it easier for them to see how it relates back to what's already been approved and hasn't been changed. Like giving them that information that those things will go away. But when we're in the public hearing, notifying what we're doing, having those in really helps to see how little changes there really are.
That's a great point, Michelle.
I think it's a really great point.
Yeah. So let's do that until we're ready to approve.
I can even add more back in.
Sure.
Is that the thing, do we have to be careful that we're presenting the exact document?
I think if there's a cover page that states, please note that page numbers that are referencing the current set of regulations will be removed upon adoption, that will cover us.
Okay.
And the font is different.
Yeah, or I would be most comfortable just with a preamble, just stating these are reference points for the purpose of the public hearing. Upon adoption, they'll be removed.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so moving on, Article 7, zoning permits. This was a request to move admin and sort of break up admin and enforcement so that we're dealing with the administration earlier in the regulations. The language is not new. It's just putting all the administrative actions of the ZEO in the forefront so that one is aware of the need for a zoning permit and how it gets issued. That's just earlier on in the document.
Do you guys remember this part used to be in Article 12 under enforcement? And
It makes a lot of sense to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
And then we add, I mean, other requirements, it's redundant because it's been mentioned before, but the more I find reiterating things in regulations, it's more, sometimes it's helpful. So just again, mentioning that other approvals in addition to zoning permits may be required. We did add, if the ZEO deems it necessary to determine zoning compliance, they may, I need to fix the sentence now that I'm reading it. If the ZEO deems it's necessary to determine zoning compliance, they may request an A2 quality site survey prepared by a Connecticut licensed land surveyor from the applicant rather than a plot plan. Just putting that in there, really clear language, I think is very helpful. I will add that one word that I'm missing.
Yeah.
Well, that's really important, Janelle. That's good that that's there.
Yeah, I think like the more upfront that we can make our regulations so that no one feels like there is a surprise, the better.
Just a funny
And
thing.
of
though,
course, every potential applicant is going to pore over these regulations the way we have.
So Janelle, if I request it and they say no,
Then
As
you
opposed
can't
to-
determine compliance and I wouldn't issue a permit.
well, requesting is asking and requiring is saying you must. Just a
I mean, if you can't, do you want it to say must? Because
okay, require as opposed to request might be a bit stronger. Because I could ask and they go, well, I really don't want to do it. It just says that you can ask, you can't demand. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Karen, do you
very
prefer
good point.
that it reads if the ZEO deems it necessary. So you as ZEO are gonna, like, let's just say you can't deem compliance, they shall request an A2 survey? Yeah, because how else does one deem compliance other than
Right.
Just don't use the
Yeah.
word request, use the word required.
they will require?
They may require.
They
Nah,
may require.
that's an oxymoron.
Right.
They will require, they shall require. They
Shall.
will, yeah. I think let's manage expectations and just say will require. It's Karen's job to deem compliance. If she doesn't have the information to deem compliance, it's the applicant's job to provide it to her.
Perfect.
So, okay, will require, great. I'm glad we called that out. And then zoning permits, Karen, just want, like, this is a little housekeeping piece. They're expiring after a year. That was something that was in the regulations. I'm leaving it in. Okay.
Did we take it? We didn't take it out.
No. I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. I think people think zoning permits are as good forever. So moving on, Article 7 is very short. Again, it's just all the administration pieces that were tucked in the back end of the current zoning regulations. Next, we get into our site plan and special permit procedures. It's not a very exciting chapter in my opinion, but it's really important because it just lays out everything that's needed. It's not that creative. Most of it's just from statute. And I mean, we can go over it. I've really tried to incorporate all of the links to statute so that if one wants to look further and really read into all the various requirements around special permit and site plan that they can. We get into these application requirements, and what I can do here as well, you'll see we have C and then we have all these numbering. I will indent those so that you can see it's all included within what a site plan should say so that there's no questions there.
Mhm.
And then mention, like, some of this is a little bit inherent in the process, but it's called out and mentioned. So one is aware. Sanitation reports are not really the jurisdiction of the commission. However, bringing it up, making them aware, the sanitation report can really dictate where structures go on the property. So it's, again, familiarizing the applicant of the process.
Mhm.
Erosion and sedimentation control plans, they weren't really clearly mentioned, like pointedly in the last version or the current version of the regulations. So I think just bringing it to light, any project statutorily required if it's greater than a ½ acre of disturbance, erosion sedimentation control plan is required. So bringing that into the approval process, making note of it. Then we get into the approval criteria. Again, it's all currently italicized. I will not italicize that when we hit the final, but this was all brought together from the current regulations so that in the event that the commission has an application, you can go A through F and just make sure that that application is satisfying all of those requirements, and then have a lot of confidence with your approval or your denial.
Great.
We used to have a funny thing with the old regs where James will remember this probably, especially if we had a public hearing on a special permit, for example, we'd be flipping through that red book of the old regulations, finding the different sections that mention the different requirements. Remember
That
that?
is correct. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
would,
this
yeah.
this will make our lives so much
Yeah,
easier.
thank you.
I had little yellow stickies all over my document.
I witnessed that because that was my first meeting that Gordon had invited me to. It was the restaurant approval. And I remember watching everyone up front with their binders and like all this paper fluffing. I was like, So
The
then,
other thing, if I could say one more thing, when you see all these references to the laws, all these blue fonts, you really begin to understand that zoning regulation and local control, those two concepts are sort of, the idea of local control is somewhat of a misnomer.
Mhm. Mhm.
We really are to a great degree guided by state statute. Anyway, that's just my editorial comment. Sorry to
No.
keep you.
No, all good, all good. So then
On that note of the blue hyperlinks, I
Yeah.
noticed on this page, there's a Connecticut General statute. Yep, that one is not blue.
I will make sure that it is blue. I'll go throughout and I'll circle this one right now. Thank you for that.
Another good
Yes.
pickup.
Yeah, perfect. I'm circling it right now. Okay. And the thing what's nice when Connecticut or their legislatures update the law, I've noticed even as like chapter 8-2 has changed somewhat recently, that hyperlink is still relevant. So even though the law has changed, it doesn't make that hyperlink no longer workable. They're actually utilizing that. So it's helpful because it would be unfortunate if over time with updates to legislation and other things that all of these hyperlinks became null and void. So something I've
They
checked
must have changed that recently because it's always been a disaster using the state's website.
I think COVID really helped them get things up to date online. So we have that to our benefit because I will be diligent as long as I'm just working with the town to make sure that these hyperlinks stay relevant. But there's definitely times that there are things that don't get carried over to whatever's in their, we can't control a URL. So keeping that in mind, but it's helpful that they've been pretty diligent about updating those. Modifications, that's sort of new. It just iterates and makes it known that if changes are made, they do need to come back to the commission and or be brought to the land use officer's attention. This section we've talked about, but I just want to reiterate, it brings to light that it can be a little bit flexible and it can be a conversation between the ZEO and the chair, whether the modification is substantial and it needs to go back before the commission as a decision, or if it's something that can be reported to the commission as an administrative action. So giving the ZEO, the chair, and their confidence and comfortability with the commission, knowing that there's a little bit of adaptation with modifications because they happen, there's changes in the field. And sometimes if it's something that's benign, it's nice to just be able to do administratively. But if it's something that really impacts the decision that the commission took, to be able to bring it back to the commission. So that's in there. Zoning permit and administration, this is sort of a reiteration of what we just saw, but it's important to remind anyone going after a site plan or a special permit, you still need a zoning permit. So rather than skip over that, we're keeping it in there, and then referencing Article 7 as well. Then we get, what? Sorry.
I'm sorry, it's a concept that really hadn't sunk in on me. So does this mean, does the special permit have a separate application form from a zoning permit?
It should.
Does it, Karen?
Yes, it does. Yeah,
So
the
does
zoning,
that mean
the
that
special
someone-
permit, the special permit form, basically, and it's a little bit too basic. It just asks you to define what section and a short blurb about what it is, but then it goes into all the criteria that you have to satisfy, your specific, your whatever, and then on the back it talks about the the noticing that you have to do to your butters, the time frame, et
Yeah,
cetera,
but
et cetera.
so hang on. So if I want a special permit, I fill that form out and I pay a fee, right? Then I fill out the zoning application form as well and pay another fee?
I have not required anybody to pay a double fee. For
Okay,
instance,
but you do make them fill out the two forms?
Yes.
Okay,
for instance, a special permit for a detached accessory apartment. In comes the special permit with a site plan, area health, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, full site plan. And I combine the zoning permit in with in the special
Fine.
permit, because it really, the zoning permit is clearly the site plan and all the other particular.
okay, that's fine. That's fine. I just needed to clarify that. I don't know if anybody else was surprised to hear this.
Yeah,
Well,
I didn't know that either. That's
It's
good.
news to me.
It's very interesting. I will point out one thing, it's gotta be 10 years ago, when we had to change our fee ordinance in terms of what we had to collect, because the state of Connecticut fee went from $10 to 20, then to 30, and then to 60. So every zoning permit, we have to, $58 goes to the state of Connecticut. Well, if you have a $25 zoning permit, the town was paying for a lot of things that they shouldn't have. But in many towns, the zoning permit is not under $100 as it is in the town.
One of these days, we're gonna get around to comparing fees between Cornwall and the other towns. And you're not gonna like that, Karen.
I'm not gonna like that, but it was also predicated by the fact that there was conversations in terms of from the top down, which means the first selectman's office, about making sure that the zoning, that the land use office made it easy, made it possible for
That's
everyone.
fine, but
to
this
get
this
permits.
isn't the time or place to be
Okay.
discussing that, I don't think,
All right.
okay? I
But that's,
haven't.
but that's a combination, is why I do that at this point in
Yeah,
time.
all right, that's fine. Under certificate of compliance, I have a question. My understanding is that there's a state statute that prevents the building inspector from issuing an occupancy permit
Mhm.
until the certificate of compliance is issued. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And is it followed?
Not everywhere.
Do we have any idea about Cornwall?
In Cornwall it is, or at least my
Okay.
experience has been Paul won't issue a CO unless Karen
Yes.
signs off.
He's good.
Yay, yay.
Yeah, and
Okay, good to know.
Anna, I just scrolled back because you'll see that does get mentioned in our Article 7 about the building permit, combined zoning permit until the ZEO signs off, just so that everyone knows about that.
Okay, great.
Okay, then we get into our special permit requirements. A lot of it is carryover, so it just gets repeated. Oh, sorry, I'm scrolling too quickly. So here we go. We have our special permit requirements. We discuss our procedure, all the requirements. Again, it might seem like it's a reiteration. And then we get into the concept of a public hearing. All special permits are subject to our notice to abutters. This is carried from our current page 32. Notice to neighboring municipalities. There's 4 different requirements to notify our neighbors, should we need to. And then we get into our approval criteria. So again, a helpful tool if the commission has a special permit before them and they need help making their decision, to really have this page as the guidance. Conditions for approval built into special permits. Special permits can be conditioned upon certain performative elements, site plan details. And this is really put out there very specifically what can be conditioned. We get into bonds, just that's pulled over from page 34, and then our notice of decision, we tie that back into statute. That can sometimes be an afterthought. People forget that you think like, oh, wow, we made it through the hearing process, but it isn't over until it's over. The recordation of the special permit on the land records, that's also another thing to really, because special permits run with the land, to really make sure that all of that administrative housekeeping works so that the town has really good land records. Because there are these things that in perpetuity, that use has been approved. So that gets mentioned, that's carryover from page 38. Again, we get into modifications, so things do change, people wish to change their plans. And I've seen that actually a lot this year with all of our supply chain issues. So really creating an avenue that's friendly to the applicant and friendly to the town, so that there's note that permittee should notify the town, but also there's some flexibility as far as the route that the town wants to take around the approval. So it's not requiring the commission needs to go back and revisit it. It's giving them the chance if they need to, and also leaving it up to the ZEO's discretion. Again, we're reiterating zoning permits and administration. So just so the applicant that's going through the special permitting process, if there's a structure involved that's going to be requiring that zoning permit, to know that there's these follow-up pieces. You think you make it through because you get approval, but there still is that follow-up piece that you'll need these other permits, and that they do expire. Then we move into overlay zones, if we're ready.
Mhm.
Okay, so overlay zones, we have our Housatonic River overlay zone. This was a very complex overlay zone to sort of reconfigure. I didn't want to do too much because it is coming from the Housatonic River Commission. So really the regulations, I wanted to keep them intact because they have been inherited from the Housatonic River Commission. So
Actually, they were written by Tom McGowan.
oh, well, good to know.
And they became a model for most of the other towns involved in the Housatonic River Commission.
Yeah, great.
Just giving credit where credit is due.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. You'll see I've worked in so that all of the overlay zones sort of follow this overview, boundaries, definitions, and then we get into the more specifics. The Housatonic River overlay zone really has the most specifics. You'll see here intent and purpose. What I'll do is I'll indent all these numbers over. And then same thing for general standards, just so everyone knows that the hierarchy exists. Because this is the Housatonic River overlay zone is quite long. I've really kept it intact and referenced other sections that might be needed, like erosion and sedimentation control plans, stormwater management plans. But again, have really left it as it is. Try to make some of the language a little bit more concise where possible. And then we get into all of the approval criteria, all of our specific standards. Where you see numbers, I will be indenting. The outer corridor standards. So there's inner corridor standards, there's outer corridor standards, really trying to make that all very clear. And then we move on to our much shorter aquifer protection overlay zone. What I have done in its intent and purpose is actually explained in aquifer. I don't think that was in the regulations currently, just so that gets brought to light. And then we get into A, intent and purpose, and B is just your uses permitted. And you'll see flood hazard follows that same organization. So our intent and purpose, and then all of the uses permitted, where you're seeing numbers, again, I'll indent that.
I can't find my own notes that I wrote as I read all of this, but somewhere you referred to the wild and scenic study.
Mhm.
And since you wrote this, the Housatonic River has been designated a wild and scenic river.
Oh, that's
According to people I know on the Housatonic River Commission, it was part of the omnibus reconciliation bill that was just passed.
great.
Isn't that
How do
interesting?
how do we bring that to light?
Well, first of all, I would want to confirm that it's true and not just hearsay.
It is
Yeah.
completely true.
Yeah.
It received wild and scenic designation last month. Yes,
It did. Okay.
it did.
Yeah.
I just noticed that you mentioned wild and scenic somewhere.
Yeah, so Anna, I brought back up that page. It's intent and purpose, so it might be nice because it was probably the part of a study that my assumption is a precursor to this award, deeming
Yeah.
it wild and scenic. It might be nice to get a little bit of language in there just so we
Right. Just
seem
in that paragraph.
yeah, just so we seem a little bit more relevant and aware. So certainly I'm happy you brought that up because I think for these regulations to seem really current, to include that will be great.
Okay.
I'll work on that and I'll send it out. And Karen, if you have any sort of official language or any more information, please let me know.
I'll get it from Bill Tingley. It was in,
Oh,
I
cool.
think it's actually the newspaper. Yeah.
That's great.
And
Perfect.
some of you may remember that I've told you earlier, but perhaps I forgot to do this. The Housatonic River Commission was formed in the 1970s with the express purpose of getting it designated as a wild and scenic river. It has taken
Cool.
over
Yeah.
50 years of concerted effort.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Wherever we can mention that and highlight that, the better. Yeah. And I'm curious in this, Karen, just as you're speaking to Bill Tingley, I am curious if that designation is going to cause them to have to revisit their regulations or adopt and amend anything.
I think that the regulations were written specifically to get the designation, as what we had to do to get the Farmington River designation was to show that all of the towns and municipalities along that corridor were going to support the intent of a federal designation by having laws in effect that would continue to make it a wild and scenic river.
Cool.
In the Farmington River Wild and Scenic came in under 2 years because of issues with the MDC and the diversion of water. The true wild and scenic designation is really on the Housatonic River, and it was a long time coming. But this manual was created to support the designation. Yeah, and all the rules and regulations were the thing that showed that there was a statewide municipal, multi-municipal acceptance and support of the designation. And that's what the federal government looks for to do it.
Cool. That's
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
No,
For
it's been a special project of mine.
yeah. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. And so speaking of Housatonic River, we are in flood hazard overlay zone, which is why we have flood hazard overlay zone standards. You'll see we talk about our intent and purpose and then the uses that are permitted. And it ties back to the zoning map. So that is helpful, that one knows that there's maps around the flood hazard. I believe also FEMA is supposed to be making these maps digital for all of our towns. I've yet to see it, but they keep saying it's coming. I'll do a double, triple check because if we can reference those FEMA maps somewhere, it'll be really helpful. Because right now they're referenced, but they're not actually available digitally.
Well, I think they're in the process of updating. There's been a lot of work on it, but I don't think they finished all the final pieces because all the maps, for instance, in the town clerk's office are very dated.
Yeah, 1979, I think. Yeah.
That's on my list of things we need to do is get updated maps for any number of things.
Yeah.
If I could mention another little factoid, John Calhoun, who's now 82 years old, remembers the great flood of, what year was it, Karen? 55.
55?
Yeah. As a boy, he had to help pack sandbags around the Bates meat market because it was, there was a flood threatened from Millbrook
Wow.
coming down in front of it.
Hmm.
And
That's
Yeah.
that's better than my father's memory, who, my grandfather was a funeral director, so he had to get bodies out of the river in Torrington.
Ooh.
oh,
Oh,
Yeah,
not
rough.
fun.
No, it was a bad one.
Wow.
Wasn't Millbrook completely covering the road in front
Yes.
of, yeah,
But I've been informed that the wastewater disposal committee, when they picked their site, were especially careful to pick the one area that wasn't flooded during that historic flood.
Cool.
So they're on the ball. That's good to know.
That's cool. Yeah, well, not to, I'm not gonna say it. I was just gonna say, we'll need to update these regs then, but I'm not gonna go there.
No.
So Cornwall Plains overlay zone, then we get into, and again, intent and purpose, our use is permitted. And then this does have special permitted uses very specifically, and the standards and criteria for those special permitted uses. So I would look at them as supplemental to your base special permit requirements. Something to consider as an addition should you get an application in the Cornwall Plains overlay zone that requires a special permit. We also get into, so this is all just language from that. Ooh, sorry.
I'm so sorry. I'm
No.
just talking too much. But there's this
It's okay.
bizarre bed and breakfast provision in the Cornwall Plains zone that allows you to have up to 15 rooms.
I've noticed that. I believe that
Yeah.
conflicts with a later amendment.
Yes, our later amendment allows 6. And I think later when you talk about bed and breakfast, you mistakenly wrote 3 there. We'll get there. But
Okay.
this phenomenon of 15 is something else we'll have to do something about.
is it,
I'm sure that had something to do with the big Marvelwood building.
Of course it did. The 2 big Marvelwood buildings, which are now privately owned by one person.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and as I was going through the list of amendments, I did see that number had changed over time. I don't know if it got carried over into the actual text of the regulation.
No.
Okay. Is now a time to do that or no?
Well, I don't really know.
Janelle, can we talk about that? Because there's something that came to light after we did that. That whole regulation, yeah.
What, the amendment that brought it up to 6?
To the number, because certain occupants, bed and breakfast with certain occupancy bring in a whole different piece about building code and safety. And so it's contingent on some other things that we didn't realize. Yeah.
My approach with bed and breakfast establishments when towns are grappling with the number of people, I always tie it to what is supported by your sanitary system and what is permissible by building code, and I leave it at that rather than it being an arbitrary number that P&Z just magically comes up with. I think it should be dictated by the site's circumstances, and that obviously all parking would need to be provided on site. So between a septic, your septic field, your well, your parking, and your structure, you're really hemmed in as to how many occupants or rooms one can have.
That amendment was in fact the result of a single petitioner, a citizen who asked us to increase for their benefit. We did it.
We're talking about
so-
the 6. We're talking about the 6, not the 15, right?
Right, we're talking about the 6. The 15 is kind of an anomaly that was pertinent to the 19, I don't know when it was,
All
80s,
the
90s,
19 older,
when
Oh.
Marvelwood School left.
right?
I would think that we would update the regs to show, just describe them, just like Janelle said, having those limitations with a maximum of 6. Since that's our latest.
Yeah, that's, I would, I
So
mean,
we should change the 15. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
yeah.
Okay,
I'm fine with
let's
that.
do it.
And 6 with the historical knowledge and the reference that that amendment was made.
Right.
And we're just now, if there's a conflict, cleaning all those conflicts up.
Right.
yeah, that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
That's what I was
That's
saying.
the whole point.
That's why I'm here. Okay, and I'm really glad you brought that up. Okay, then we get into our standards and criteria for the special permit uses, really getting into the elements that the commission is going to look at on top of the special permit provisions that are just baked into every application. Moving forward, we then get into the planned conservation zone. So if everyone remembers, it's a floating zone. It does not actually currently exist anywhere physically in town. It would take an applicant to come to the commission with a proposal with not only a map, but also the text to propose this zone in an area which is in R3 or R5 with that fits all the stipulations of this planned conservation zone. So.
And we have never, ever had one.
Mm-mm.
Right, Karen?
Janelle, you brought something up about the PDD, the Winvian, in Morris. That was designed so that you had to do exactly that, bring the map in, have a hearing basically as to if it was an appropriate place and have the whole narrative, and it very difficult. It's an extensive process.
Yeah, it requires professionals. Yeah. So
Okay, well, there it is. Maybe someday we'll get lucky.
maybe someday. So naturally leaving that all in there, then we get into our special use provisions. I've teetered back and forth. It's really up to all of you. I've called it specific use provisions. I've called it special use provisions. Does anyone have a preference?
Janelle, can I go back to that planned zone,
Yeah, of course.
conservation zone?
Sure.
That's, I'm sorry, I had my mic muted.
It's
So
okay.
This is not a specific zone. It can actually exist in those zoning areas, and it's something that can actually be created.
Correct.
Can you clarify that a little bit? Does that exist in other towns?
Yes. Yes. So
course.
in planning school, or when you're learning planning, it's referred to as a floating zone. So the concept has been bore out. The town has worked through a process to accept this as a concept, but hasn't done all of the due diligence to determine where it would be and how, and the specificity and design. They really leave that for an applicant to come forth with a very clear application of what it is that they would be proposing. In these cases, what I've seen locally, these planned conservation areas were an attempt to be a little bit more creative with single family housing and subdivisions, and to get a component of conservation on top of that. So no one's actually come forth with a project proposal. It's sort of open territory in R3 and R5. But of course, it'd be a lot of due diligence of an applicant to do a feasibility study, to bring a concept before the commission, to survey everything and really propose sophisticated site development for the commission to then adopt. So the onus with these floating zones is really on that applicant to bring the information to the town and not the other way around.
Thanks.
So how does the term conservation play into this? I mean, is there a requirement to conserve the land?
Yes, so I wasn't here or a planner when this was thought of, so I can't really speak to the background, but it follows a very similar theme of what I have seen that was thought of as maybe a mechanism for conserving land and making sure that the buildings go in one spot and this conserved parcels go otherwise. I've seen it with a lot of subdivisions when subdivisions were really the happening thing. Towns put up protective measures to make sure that everything just wasn't going to be subdivided, but there'd be a conservation element.
Let me express how I view it, and Janelle, correct me if I've thought of this wrong. Let's say somebody has, 25 acres of land in a 5-acre zone. Normally, they could subdivide and have 5-acre plots, but they decide to go for a planned conservation zone where on 10 acres, they put 10 homes, 1 home per acre, and then they have the other 15 as the conservation zone. So it's a way that they can get more density on their property. But of course, the cost of that development is probably pretty high. Does that make sense? Is that what it is, Janelle?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great summary. I don't know the intent that was behind this particular regulation when it was crafted, but that's definitely along the lines of my interpretation.
That was the intent, and that is the right assumption from my understanding. Okay.
There's the other element, I'll go back to the Morris Winvian, because it was also agricultural land. The conservation and use of productive agricultural soils, conserving agricultural soils was also part of that, because it can have an agricultural element in it, houses and uses consistent with agriculture.
So Karen, they did more building in a smaller area and left the rest of the land open for agriculture?
The Winvian has a restaurant or whatever. They have housing to support the use, and they also have housing to support the agricultural use of the land for the resort in some fashion, and to feed and to the agriculture component to support all the uses on all the land. And I believe it's a fair amount of agricultural soils that was conserved as well that will stay in agricultural use. Yeah.
Yes, and unlike land trusts, the land will actually be used for agriculture, which is a big bonus.
Mm-hmm. It could be a good future site visit.
Yes, that'd be fun. Let's stay there.
It's quite pricey. Okay, anyone else on our overlay zones? Okay, so special use provisions versus specific use provisions. Does anyone have a say? I was wavering.
No.
I like special use.
Yeah, I think it just ties into the whole it's a special use because it's particular to a zone, and also it's particular to an approval. And it ties back in just to the special permit process. So I'm gonna stick with special use. So you'll see all of these concepts, a lot of them came from, I think it was specific requirements of the current regulations. And there were a few different pieces within the regulations. This just brings all those special uses, the uses that require a little more scrutiny when it comes from the commission, a little bit more application requirements when it comes to getting the approval. So it's just further guidance for these very specific uses. We start with our accessory apartments and apartment uses, and we start with A, which is our intent and purpose. Then we get into our approval process, And then we get into specific provisions. I'll be indenting all these numbers. I have left in yellow, and this is for that subcommittee that's working on the accessory apartments and apartment uses. This is more background for all of you. The yellow are areas of concern. We are not changing them in the reorg rewrite, but they are elements of big concern, just due to what they say and the restrictions around who is using accessory apartments. So just concepts to keep in mind when this subcommittee is meeting. And
Those are your marching orders, guys. Things that have to be changed.
but we won't be changing them now.
Janelle, go up on that page 34. You have another R2 in there. I just noticed.
I don't know why, but thank you. I appreciate.
You're welcome.
I appreciate your eyes. Thank you for
Apparently
that.
R2 pops out at me.
I don't know. I'm glad. I'm really glad. So
R2D2?
I guess so.
maybe, yeah. So accessory apartments and apartment uses, we will revisit this and talk about in the near future. Then we get into our conversion of existing single family dwellings to triplexes or more multifamily dwellings. Again, I did area a highlight of concern. We're not going to touch it now. It's more it's for us to understand that these are things that we'll be getting to. And the same goes just with our parking requirements. Those are no longer in line with statute, but rather than do a few changes now, this is our next task for our overall rewrite. We'll deal with that then. Antennas, towers, and wireless communications. This is just referred to as a separate section. I'm going to just leave it that way. Apartment use in a business building. Again, we have our intent and our purpose, and then our special use standards. The subcommittee might want to look at this as well, just to make sure that when you're updating your apartment uses overall, that we're just cleaning up some concepts, understanding, especially like encouraging mixed uses. So we should definitely look at this as that subcommittee, just to make sure that this is really putting forth the current concepts and goals of the POCD as we're updating our other accessory apartment uses. Then we get into attainable housing cuts. So most of you were here for this amendment. This was worked on and approved somewhat recently. It just, again, lays out our intent and our purpose, our definitions, and then our specific provisions involving attainable housing cuts. Then we move into farms, farming, and agriculture. So if some of you recall, I think it was an amendment in Anna, when was that? 2019. And it just never made its way into the overall document. So this is now capturing all of those agricultural and those agricultural accessory uses in one place, sort of drawing on some of the specifics. So we have intent and purpose definitions. Then we get into our agricultural accessory uses that are subject to zoning permit. Then we get into the specific requirements. Then we get into specific provisions, just very specific to farmers markets, which seems to be the topic of discussion often. When I was looking at that amendment list, doing the final page, farmers markets was there many times. Then we get into our agricultural and accessory uses that are subject to a special permit. Then we get into the special requirements of those uses that are subject to a special permit. And then we move on. I'm sorry, I missed something. Okay, anyone? I hear background noise. I don't know if somebody's trying to speak.
That's me. I'm gonna mute,
Oh.
sorry.
Oh, no, no, it's fine. I'm not trying to. Then we move on to home business. This should all be close to your near or distant memory. Intent and purpose, definitions, our approval process. So again, this is not changing. I'll be indenting our numbers just to clean up how it reads. It's very specific. We have a lot in here. I'll do the same with our numbers down here. And then we move on to mixed uses. So this is where there was another conflict within the regulations that stated there shall be one use per lot. But then there was a section on page 22 that says that the commission can allow like more than one use on a lot. So this is cleaning that up and saying that the commission can allow more than one permitted non-residential use to be conducted on a single lot in a GB zone. And it does not say anywhere that only one use can be allowed per lot, just because that can get very, very complicated. There's primary uses, there's secondary uses, accessory uses, and there's also a whole section on allowing for mixed uses. So we're bringing 10.7 mixed uses just into our special use provision so that it's noted that they are allowed, particularly in the GB zone. Mobile homes, this is something that we see sort of historically when mobile homes were the center of much more discussion than we see now. Where we do see them now is when they're used for that temporary use. So I find it really helpful that the town of Cornwall does have the provision to allow for temporary use of mobile homes in the current regulations. So it gets into mobile homes as residential use and then as temporary use, and the current regulations do provide for very specific temporary uses. So again, just leaving that in there. And then there is a whole section about bonds associated with mobile homes. Again, that has just been left in there.
I'm gonna just check in with everybody. It's almost 8:30. How many of you are fading?
Considering I still have to drive home from Bristol, I'm fading.
Bruce and Phil.
I'm fading
And
too.
Yeah.
Christine is
What
fading.
did Keith say?
I'm fading too. yeah.
Everybody's fading.
It's actually,
Oh geez,
it's
I'm
a-
full of vim and vigor. What's the matter with you guys?
it's an hour
Um,
later.
You took a nap? Anna?
I gotta drive home still.
All right. Well, I mean, I didn't mean to cut us off before we finished 10.
It's okay.
All right.
We've lost them all.
Okay. All right. So we'll quit now, but let's talk about, first of all, in January, we still have our special town planning meeting, which I will frankly understand if most of you don't want to attend because the chair has to, Karen has to, but you could sort of skip it.
That's January.
Karen,
I'll be there as Park and Rec, so you'll get a twofer.
yeah.
That was, that's,
The one thing I would say though, is if you have, for instance, your partners coming and trying to tell you what they've done for your town plan of conservation development, think about how you would feel if you,
Oh, you mean, you're referring to Bruce specifically. Of course, Bruce has to
Yes,
come.
she
Debbie
is.
will-
no,
Debbie will
no.
be presenting.
But no, for some of our partners like the Cornwall Housing Trust and all of those coming and presenting about all the things that they've done in compliance with your town plan, they might like to see some of your faces at least.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
I'll
you.
try to make it.
Okay, so
Monday the
anyway,
30th, right?
let's look at February because I'm seeing a chance to finish this. We've got a little bit left of 10 and then 11 and 12, and I don't think they're especially long, are they, Karen? Are they? Maybe they are. Signs and parking, oh my God. And then,
It's not that long. It's really
then-
not that bad.
okay, and then lot development standards, and then enforcement is really short. So I'm thinking we could have a special meeting early in February to finish it.
I'm
No.
probably not around, sorry, but
Okay,
Try
All
me.
Are you in April?
No, it's okay. It's okay. When are you looking, Anna?
Well, I'm just trying to squeeze everything into February. I'd love to have our town forum on this, in February.
I don't think we're ready.
You don't think we're
Let's-
ready?
I'd like to us go through this whole thing and then let
Talk about
Janelle
it after.
clean everything up. Give us a chance to look over with all the changes before we give it to the public, have us have a little time with the actual final version, because it seems like there's a lot of moving pieces still. That's just my own
Okay.
2 cents.
Oh, well, listen, you're
It
the
was-
person who's one of the most familiar with the old regs, so.
Well, what we
Um,
just went through tonight was that was pretty dense, and we went through it quick. I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance. I didn't take the time to actually go through it like
So
I did that first section. I'd like to do that personally, but
Yeah.
Okay.
And
right.
I mean, just to chime in, I really think for the commissioners to take the time to really go through everything so that at the 11th hour, there isn't a moment where it's like, Janelle, I need you to like fix this typo just for optics. This document has been circulating so many times that like, please take the time to review it now and give me input and feedback. It's so helpful. And they're your regulations.
Okay, so we'll see everybody at the regular February meeting, and I would accept a motion to adjourn.
Oh, wait, can I bring up one quick thing? And this
Yeah.
is reference to what you have been saying, Anna. The concept of a forum, I give you credit for wanting to have a forum before a public hearing. But I think an article in the Chronicle explaining the reasoning behind a forum.
I'm doing it. It's done. It's
Okay,
done. It's being written. I've requested it, and
Okay.
they're gonna put it in January.
because
or
I think a lot of commission
Oh,
members
February.
need to understand what the difference between a forum and a public hearing is, and not get caught in the crosshairs of the public, not understanding what they can do at a forum, an educational forum, as opposed to a public hearing. And I
Well,
think,
it's very simple. At an educational forum, public can expect to ask questions and get answers. Whereas at a public hearing, they can't.
Yeah,
They
but
can
the
make-
public, Karen's right, the public needs to know that.
The public can make statements, provide evidence at a public hearing, but they can't expect to have questions answered. So isn't that correct? Yeah,
Yes, but-
that's
Thank you.
exactly, it would be nice if that was clarified before we started another round of what we saw recently. And I give you credit for doing it. I think it's really good faith, Anna. I'm very proud of you.
all right. So we'll meet in February, and then we'll decide on when we're gonna have the public forum, and then we'll have a public hearing in association with our March meeting.
Great. My one
Yeah.
question, just not to be answered now, is just, will these forums, hearings be taking place in person or online?
Well, they're all gonna be Zoom.
Okay, just
I'm
curious.
committed, I'm now committed to Zoom.
Okay. Good to know, just curious.
Well, some of you had expressed strong interest for some in-person meetings. And we did a couple, and we'll go back to having some in-person meetings, but I really think that with Zoom, you get better public participation. And I think that's important.
Great,
So
great.
we are an
Brave
old
woman.
town full of people who don't want to drive at night.
One little housekeeping thing too, as everyone is reading this at their bedside, please, if you do have notes, to send them through the chair. She will disperse them to me, and anything, just send them her way.
Great.
Great, thank you.
Okay,
thank you.
motion.
So moved.
Motion
to
to adjourn
adjourn.
by James Laparda, seconded by Phil West. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Done for the night. Thank you,
Good night.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night, guys.
everyone.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
Bye.